we're going to talk about vectors. Vectors are numbers that we use a lot in physics, and you've already had some exposure to them. And we're going to elaborate a little more on that because they're very useful for solving problems. So let's talk about a vector. A vector is a quantity that has magnitude and direction. So, a vector is a quantity that has magnitude and direction. And we represent them with arrows. The length of the arrow represents its magnitude. Is the magnitude. And the arrowhead points in the direction. Vectors can be added and subtracted, and it's really a convenient way of representing how different forces act on one another. So let's say we've got two vectors. This one might be 3, we'll call it vector A, equals 3 meters, and vector B equals 2 meters. The way we add them together is that we draw the first vector, and then we take the second vector, maintaining the same orientation and direction. We draw it with its tail on the head of the second. So if this vector is 3 meters and this one is 2 meters, we have a vector that's 3 meters long and one's 2 meters. We then figure out the sum by drawing what's called a resultant vector. And so if this is 3 meters and this is 2 meters, the resultant vector equals 5 meters. So there's 2 rules to follow. 1, place the tail of the second vector on the head of the second, second step is then to draw the resultant. So then we draw resultant vector from the tail of the first vector to the head of the second. It's pretty simple, right? We can also then subtract vectors from one another. And the rule is actually the same as regular old addition. So let's say again we have vector A, that is 3 meters, and vector B, which is 2 meters. So to subtract, vector A minus vector B. Well, the first rule is that if we were to add 3 and 2, we would say, if we were to just subtract their magnitudes, we would say 3 minus 2 equals 3 plus negative 2, which we know equals 1. Well, the negative of a vector is one that goes in the opposite direction. So if b is 2 meters, negative b equals negative 2 meters, which means that it points in the negative direction. So to subtract, we change the sign of the second vector. So we get something like this. 3 meters minus 2 meters. So we put the tail of the first on the tail of the second on the head of the first, and then that gives me the resultant vector, r. So I draw from the tail of the first vector to the head of the second, and that gives me the resultant. So therefore, vector A minus vector B equals 1 meter. So subtraction is pretty straightforward. We just move the vector in the other direction.